Welcome to City of the Goddess by Alan Butler, Part 2. Who is this, and what does she have to do with the running of the world today? Her usual name these days is Armed Freedom, but her real name is Liberty. As for her importance, she stands at the heart of the world's best-kept secret, and she is more important than you could imagine. This is me, Alan Butler. I'm a professional writer, and I've spent the last 30 years delving into some of the deepest of mysteries. My research has now brought me to an understanding of what motivates those who are really in charge of the world. Armed Freedom is just one of the faces of the goddess of Washington, D.C. There are many others, and you can see them all over the most important city on our planet. So what is so special about Washington, D.C.? In some ways, the answer to this question is self-evident. Washington, D.C. is the capital city of the most powerful nation the world has ever known. Almost everything that happens across the globe is responsive in some way to the United States of America. This is the White House. Supposedly, within the walls of this building, decisions are taken that have a great bearing on all our lives. At the top of the tree of the US government is the President, who lives and works in the White House. But is the President really in charge? No. Washington, D.C. is filled with anonymous buildings, and it is within these closed and generally unknown walls that decisions are really taken. But what motivates the movers and shakers? And are there imperatives at work we don't know about? Here is the symbol of Freemasonry, and many people assume that it is Freemasons with their secret society who are really in charge of Washington, D.C., and everywhere else for that matter. The truth is more complicated. Freemasonry is merely a servant to the real seats of power, even though the vast majority of Freemasons are not even aware of the fact. This is not to suggest that Freemasonic agencies do not possess power. On the contrary, Freemasonry is extremely influential, especially in the United States. Scottish Rite Freemasonry is run by a committee of genuinely powerful men, headed by a non-elected Supreme Commander who, though a generally benign ruler, owes little or nothing to a democratic process as far as most Freemasons are concerned. Quite a few of those who look deeply into the political and economic workings of the world assume that we are on the threshold of a new world order. They suggest that a powerful cartel of extremely influential people must have been and are trying to create a one-world government to which we must all look for every detail of our lives in the not-too-distant future. Is it true? In a way it is, but the reality is more complex. There are people who want everyone to respond to a single government, and of course there are those religious types who dream of building the New Jerusalem, in which everyone will have the same beliefs and follow the same religion. Most of those who speak about the New Jerusalem assume it will be Christian in nature, but that isn't the way the real movers and shakers feel. Their religious imperatives are entirely different. This is my new book, City of the Goddess. I spent decades uncovering the information it contains, and I travelled many thousands of miles in my search for what really lies at the heart of our world and its political, economic and religious imperatives. In what follows, I want to let you into some of the secrets I uncovered, things that some people would prefer you not to know, well, at least not for the moment. You are likely to be extremely surprised at what I have to tell you, and Washington, D.C., once you see it through new eyes, will probably amaze you more than anything else. Everywhere you go in Washington, D.C., you will see statues of goddesses of one sort or another. There are goddesses in every park, at the junction of roads, in public spaces, and adorning a wealth of buildings. It's really hard to be out of sight of at least one or two. So many, in fact, that on my last expedition I totally lost track of just how many there are. I have literally hundreds of pictures. So what's so strange about goddess statues? At first sight, nothing. After all, most of central Washington DC is neoclassical. In other words, it apes the building styles of the Greeks and Romans. As a result, one would expect many statues, and of course a lot of these would be goddesses. So if the statues were the only consideration, we might not look twice. However, this is not the case, because in addition to goddess statues, Washington DC also has a proliferation of zodiac wheels. A zodiac wheel is a pictorial representation of the heavens. For thousands of years, for convenience sake, those looking at the sky have split it into 12 segments, each of which has a name and a symbol. These are the signs of the zodiac, and they are normally shown in a circle. Writer David Overson noticed that there were literally dozens of zodiac wheels portrayed around Washington DC, and he was correct. This, for example, is a zodiac picked out in marble on the floor of the United States Library of Congress. Here is another. This one is also in the Library of Congress, but instead of being on the floor, it was painted on the wall. In his book, The Zodiacs of Washington DC, David Overson pointed out that many of the zodiacs he discovered showed a definite bias in one way or another towards the zodiac sign of Virgo. This is a good example. It's a zodiac on the Federal Reserve Board building ceiling. Note that the sun is shown to the right of the picture, in a position clearly indicating the sun in the zodiac sign of Virgo. It's highlighted by the arrow. This happens once each year during September. So many Washington zodiacs favour Virgo that this cannot be a coincidence. So what is so significant about Virgo? This is the zodiac symbol and glyph for Virgo. As you can see, she's always portrayed as a beautiful woman, and as in this case, she's often shown carrying foliage or corn. Virgo means virgin. Like all the other zodiac signs, this one was named many centuries ago, and it was always particularly important to humanity. This is because the sun is in Virgo at the time of the harvest. For this reason, it is certain that Virgo represents the great mother goddess, who was worshipped across much of the world for countless thousands of years in antiquity. It was the great mother goddess that gave birth to all creation, and so the fruit and grain of the harvest was considered to come directly from the great goddess herself. Prior to the rise of Christianity and Islam, this goddess was worshipped everywhere, but in one place especially. Right back into human prehistory, people worshipped a great goddess who actually represented the earth itself. She had countless names, but probably the most well-known comes from the eastern Mediterranean, where she was known as Demeter. She was worshipped at a site in Greece called Eleusis. What could these ancient ruins possibly have to do with the most powerful and modern city in the world today? Believe it or not, there is a very real and important connection, and I'll tell you about it in City of the Goddess, Part 3.